So I think one of the things that's really important to understand is that opioid addiction can happen to absolutely anybody, regardless of your socioeconomic status, regardless of your race, regardless of absolutely anything. Opioids are an incredibly powerful drug. And for certain people, when they are prescribed opioids from a physician, from a surgery, they will very quickly become physically dependent.
The origin of the opioid epidemic stems from the overprescription of pain medication to those recovering from a multitude of surgeries and injuries, all under the assumption that the drug had no addictive qualities. Soon, it became routine to get prescribed opioids, and patients were given these pain-killing drugs for even minor inconveniences, like a toothache or ankle sprain. When doctors cut off access at the end of treatment, patients began to have feelings of withdrawal and craving, itching for this medication again. The true addictive nature of the medication was discovered around 2010, and legal action was taken to reduce the number of opioid prescriptions. However, physical dependency was not eradicated. Opioid deaths began to rise exponentially despite the prescription regulation. Here began what we now perceive as the opioid epidemic, with black market substitutes such as heroin and the more potent fentanyl being increasingly sought out. This epidemic caused more than 47,000 deaths in 2017 alone. We follow the story of a UVA entrepreneur in developing a supplementary device for patients in rehabilitation, highlighting similar services to help those on the road to recovery. Rishabh Honda of New Jersey and a few of his friends at UVA have come together to form Medlock, their startup company aimed at addressing addiction recovery. After participating in the summer incubator and winning $42,000 in funding, Medlock is on the path to releasing a product to help synthesize communication between physician, psychiatrist, and patient, in hopes of improving patients' abilities to recover from the comfort of their own home.
My name is Rishabh. I'm a second-year BME. I've been working on Medlock for almost a year and a half now. That's pretty much all I do. The end goal of the product is really to prevent anyone from relapsing, but that's obviously not reasonable. Opioids are a hard drug. You can't get everyone. I guess the goal really is to promote treatment in the patient's home. Whenever patients go into the clinic, they have these support systems. They have psychiatrists, they have doctors to keep them on their treatment regimen to make sure they're taking their prescription. But when they're at home and their neighbor's a drug dealer, it's really difficult to have all these environmental influences deter you from your treatment program.
The idea for this product came about in August of Rishabh's first year at UVA, as he reflected on the events of one of his first dispatches as an EMT in high school.
It was a Sunday afternoon, if that's relevant. It was the middle of the day. And there's a park near my station and near my house called Thompson Park. It's my town. And we got a call in for an unconscious male. And that could be a lot of things. That's not always a bad thing necessarily. But when we arrived in the scene, it was almost immediate that it was an opiate overdose. And I'd never seen one in real life, but you could just tell. It was just me and my partner on the scene at the time. And we loaded him onto the stretcher and put him into the ambulance. For a critical patient like that, you're supposed to reevaluate them every 5 minutes. We checked his pulse again, and unfortunately, he was gone.
Recognizing the source of inspiration for Medlock and their product, we spoke to Virginia Lovell, a medic and the president of the board of directors of the Charlottesville Area Rescue Squad, about the frontline response that EMS provides for opioid addiction.
So I think that one of the barriers for people accessing 911 services is certainly fear that there's going to be legal repercussions if they seek help either for themselves or for a friend that may be having an opioid-related emergency. People with addiction are incredibly intelligent folks often, and they go to great lengths to try to hide their addiction because they feel shame, because they're embarrassed that it happened to them, because they are in disbelief. These are people who may have never had any trouble with illicit substances in the past. People suffering from addiction also have frequently impairments in many other areas of their life because of that addiction. So they may be struggling with homelessness or food insecurity. They may be trying to escape a domestic violence situation or have lost custody of their kids. And so having folks in place who can help them with all of those elements is much more likely to increase their chances of being able to remain in recovery.
Yeah, turn left
call is made into the emergency communication center via 911. We always go lights and sirens. When we get there, we begin to assess the patient. So this can look very different in a variety of settings as it relates to opioid-related emergencies. We view any interaction with EMS as an opportunity for someone who is suffering with opioid addiction to potentially get connected with treatment. We can help them start breathing again, but we cannot in the EMS necessarily help them get into recovery.
Coming up with a final product was not easy. It took Medlock countless iterations and major design changes over the past year to finally reach the product they have currently.
Our product is very different now than where it started. We designed a pill lockbox that prevents patients from accessing their medications until it's the right time to take it. But we quickly realized that opioid deaths are continuing to increase, and that's because black market opioids are now on the rise. So that's like heroin, fentanyl, carfentanil, these much heavier drugs. So that's why we pivoted into the addiction recovery space, because these patients still need help getting off the drugs, and it's way harder to get off heroin than it is to get off of like OxyContin.
Knowing that Medlock aims to provide a more personalized approach to addiction recovery, we spoke to someone with similar ideals to get a better understanding of the true impact such an approach can provide. Dr. Naseema Tiareen from the Department of Psychiatry and Neurobehavioral Sciences at the UVA Medical Center started an opioid hotline and hopes her line will provide help for patients and families alike.
Because one of the things that patients have repeatedly told us in their feedback is what they like the most is to be able to talk to someone. Because there is nothing more frustrating when you need help, you call, and then they'll say, if you want this, press 3, if you want that, press 4. So we really want to see a 24/7 helpline developed in the future.
After getting a better understanding of just how important patient and doctor interaction is, we heard in more detail how Medlock's product works and its importance from a recovery standpoint.
So just to go a little bit more into what we're actually building, our platform, it's called Ember. It's an IoT platform to help patients recover from opioid addiction. It starts with our smart pill dispenser, which tracks when patients consume the recovery medications and how they're responding to it. So on the device itself, you can indicate the severity of your withdrawal symptoms during or after taking the medication. Then our platform then interprets that data to better understand how they're responding to the treatment regimen and predict when they're most likely to relapse. So these are very critical times when they're on the verge of going back to drug use. Right at those moments, we send preventative care in the form of psychology-based messaging, primarily cognitive behavioral therapy, and give them coping strategies to avoid relapse. Our approach is to go clinic by clinic to scale the product. Once the patient signs up, they receive the medications. Then they just go about their normal life, dispensing the medication. When they go into the clinic, what happens is that patients are required to bring their empty pill bottle. The provider will just see this is the dispenser data, check in with them. Are there any changes? How's your treatment process going? Things like that. Clarify the type of medications that we're dealing with here. These addiction recovery medications are something called partial opioid agonists. So they're not like the painkillers you get at the doctor. Rather, they're these drugs that help quell the withdrawal symptoms by addressing the same receptors in the brain, but they don't give that euphoric high. And they have a ceiling effect, so you can take 3 or 30 and it affects you the same way. These drugs are super important because once the patient is able to overcome the physical dependence of the drug, that's when they can start focusing more on the other aspects of their life they need to get back together. So like finding housing, finding a job, reconnecting with family, etc.
Medlock is confident in their final product and plans to run a clinical trial for their prototype in the upcoming months, despite the current setbacks caused by coronavirus and quarantining. Still, there is lots to be done and lots to improve. Ultimately, the team hopes that if their product is successful, they may move into introducing this product's use for other mental health illnesses as well, which shows surprising parallels in recovery techniques. For now, Medlock will continue hard at work in hopes of making their mark on an opioid addict's road to recovery.